Hello, I'm Debbie Kitterman, and welcome to Dare to Hear the podcast, where we equip you and challenge you to dare to hear the voice of God. Well, I have Buck Storm back in studio on the podcast. We're going to talk about another one of his books. He's actually got a series of books called the Paradise series, and this is the fifth one in the series. But the way that Buck writes, they stand alone. If you've missed our previous episodes, first I had him back with his book, The Light, back in April, and then I've had him on with The List, which was the first book in that series. And we've talked about that. And now we're going to talk about Venus Sings the Blues. But let me introduce you to him just by reading his bio. And then we're going to jump in and have a conversation about his book, Venus Sings the Blues. So Buck Storm is a recording artist and a touring musician, as well as a critically acclaimed award-winning author of 8 novels. And you can check all of his novels out too on his website, which will give you the link at the end, and also on Amazon. And among other things, his books and songs has made friends around the world. He's a native of Yuma, Arizona, and now makes his home in Idaho. So, Buck, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I loved your book, The List and The Light. I love those. They were Bible prophecy, looking at Bible prophecy and the stories from scriptures. And so this was a different flavor and a different taste, really, of your writing style, which I love, by the way. You are gifted at that. Goes with your musician status too, I'm sure, the stories that you write in your songs. But I want to talk about this book that is Venus Sings the Blues. So what is the story behind Venus Sings the Blues?
I wish I had a good answer to that story. I sort of wander through my mind and pick out things I want to write about. When I started out with Venus Sings the Blues, I had kind of a cool scene in my head. And this is the way I usually start writing books. There are people that are, in the fiction world, they call it planners and pantsers. There are those that plan. There are those that write by the seat of their pants. I am the king of organization and pantsers. I get a scene in my mind that I think makes me smile, and I'll write that scene usually, and that'll eventually turn into a novel. And I sort of get surprised along with everybody else as the story unfolds. And so, but that being said, Venus Sings the Blues is essentially, I guess you would call it an allegory. It's about a blues playing jazz pianist biker that's got a metal box that anything you put into disappears forever. And that box tends to change people's lives. And so, this is a fairly thinly veiled allegory of the fact that we can come to God with everything that gives us pain in our lives and lay them at his feet. And they disappear forever as long as we're willing to let our knuckles unwhiten. And so that's kind of what this book is about. And so that's the broad brush stroke. That being said, I love to write characters. Most of my characters, I remember American Family Association magazine said in one of their articles said, we think Buck might be crazy. Which I thought that was probably a pretty good compliment, but I love to write characters that are quirky and that interest me. And so this book's full of those.
Yes, definitely. I was like, as I was reading it, I was like, oh, I can see myself in that person. I can see myself in that person. And so there was one character that I was like, as I'm reading it and the story unfolds, I'm like, oh, totally. That's totally who I am. So when you're thinking about like the characters that you relate to the most in the book, is there one that stands out to you in Venus Sings the Blues that you would say, oh, yep, that's kind of, I relate most to that one?
Here's what's weird about that. People ask me that a lot, and I would say kind of not really. Although in this book in particular, as strange as it sounds, it would probably be Bones. Bones is not my story as a kid exactly, but in the book, he's trying to fix up this motorcycle to escape everything. And when I was 15, Bones' age, I had that same motorcycle, and it set me free, in a lot of ways, from a home that wasn't always a wonderful place to be. And so I see a lot of myself in Bones, and I never expected that. Bones was a character that was introduced in an earlier book as kind of a strange you almost didn't know if he was real or not for a while. He's a kid. And as I wrote Bones more and more, I found myself putting more and more of my early life into Bones' story. And so I would say him. Also, probably a little bit of Jimmy. I loved writing Jimmy, and I thought with Jimmy, a lot of sometimes an author will put a little bit of their own voice into it, and for him that was probably a little bit of my voice in that. But so maybe those two guys, But I think no matter how there's a little bit of you in probably every character here, right? You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be able to separate yourself from that. But I don't know if any author really does. Probably some do.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if any author really can, because I do the same thing. Like when I put myself in the pages of scriptures, like, okay, I'm going to step in here and I'm going to experience it like they're experiencing it. I think it's hard to separate that. So, and there was a couple of the characters that were in there that I was like, oh, I can relate to that. I mean, it wasn't obviously my story, but some of the things that they struggled with and that they needed to overcome, that they were running from in their lives, or they thought that was the end all. For different things, I was like, oh, I can totally relate to them. It's interesting when I was reading this, because it is so different from The List and The Light. And I was reading it and I was like kind of thinking about all the different themes that were in the book. There's regret, but then the redemption from that, past regret, and then the forgiveness and this hope. And when you were thinking about the book, was there one major theme that you were trying to write throughout it, or?
Yeah, I really, and it's a theme that I find chases through all my books, and that is, and I think because it's the theme of my life, is that God's love will find you, no matter how hard you run. Eventually, He's going to get you in a headlock and take you down to the mat with His love, and so I think that comes through. Although it's not spelled, I don't like to spell that out. I love books and movies that do spell that out. I remember the guys in the South that do the Flywheel and the Facing the Giants, those things. Whenever that redemption scene, that salvation scene, man, I cry like a baby in those. But those are not in my books generally. My books are a little more allegorical, and so. But I think that would be the theme. Although with Goodbye or with Venus Sings the Blues, it was interesting and fun for me because it all takes place at this old motel in the middle of the desert. That's basically a historical old motel, and different guests come. You'll have to read the book to find out why, but they come and they stay, and they all come together kind of for the big climax, obviously. But they all have different stories and they all have different character arcs. That was a lot of fun for me because there was a lot. There's kind of a lot going on in this book. There's each guy has different motivations. They have a different history, guy or woman, and so to write those character arcs, they all have different journeys,
Yeah.
But I think but they all kind of come to the same place. So.
Yeah, which I did. I mean, I can't remember how many chapters it was, and then you introduced two new characters, and I was like, wait, we already have a lot of characters, and then I was like, oh, this totally fits in, because I was like, why are we talking about these two random guys? But at first I was like, Venus Sings the Blues. And then you start reading it and you're like, oh, Venus is the hotel. I love this. And I loved the way that it laid out, and it just drew me into the story. And I loved that each character had a different thing that I think if you look at people's lives today, they're struggling with the same thing. I think I found myself in several of the characters, just kind of like, you were talking about as well. And I think that it's relevant. The book is relevant for today for people to read as well. And it gives them that hope and redemption story too, that we're always wanting and rooting for. But yet there was this plot twist in your book, which I'm not going to give away. We're not going to give that away because I did not see this one, I didn't see that playing out in there. And then as it did, I was like, oh, Buck is good. He is really good. It was really good. I appreciated the way that you tell a story, Buck. I really do. Okay, there was a character in here because you said, so this is the Paradise series. And so talk a little bit about that series a little bit so that people get an idea, because this is the 5th book in that series. And before I actually interviewed you, I actually went on Amazon So I wanted to see what people were saying about Venus Sings the Blues, right? And you have some faithful people. They say that this is their favorite book out of the 5 in the Paradise series. I don't know if you read your own Amazon reviews, but it was fun to see what people were saying about you, because I think you're a masterful storyteller, but it was really great to read their perspectives. It actually helped me pull a couple of questions to ask you. So yeah. So I don't even remember where my question was in all of that.
You would ask about the series, I think.
There you go.
Yeah. So back, 10 or I don't remember how many years ago now. I was a touring musician for years and years, but I've always said I was going to be a writer. I write books. I've been an avid reader for my entire life. I love books. In fact, I always joke, because on our first, my wife and I first got married in 1989. I lied on our application and for our first apartment, it said I was a writer. But it's not a lie anymore, because now I am a writer. That's what I figure. So it's all come back around. But so I just finally said, you know what, I'm going to settle down. We've been on the road. My wife and I were traveling a lot. And I said, I started a book. I thought I'd started a book, and I'm going to try to do this really quickly. So I said, I'm just going to finish this. And I finished it. I've got a lot of friends that are writers, and that I've met through the arts over the years, and so I passed it on to a friend who passed it on to another friend, who a wonderful lady named Kimberly Woodhouse, a successful writer, and she read my first manuscript, and called me on the phone and was nice enough to be honest and say, "Man, dude, you have no idea how to write a book." But she said, I enjoy your voice. I enjoy, your approach. And can I give you some helpful hints? And she kind of coached me just voluntarily. It was just so nice. And she sent me pages of stuff that I was doing wrong, that I never even thought of. I thought it was like writing a really long song. How hard could it be? I mean, I read a lot of songs. So anyway, that I kind of put myself through internet school of that there was actually a craft to this. Then I got to the point where the book was somewhat, I thought, finished. At that point, I just said, I knew to get a traditional publishing deal, I needed to have an agent. And I'd read about that. It takes months or years to find an agent. I told God, you know what, I'm going to send this off to agents. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. And I was going to leave it alone. So I picked 12 agents off of the internet. I sent them off, and in 2 hours I had an agent. A guy called me, and in fact, it was so quick. I said, man, I thought it was a scam, and I said, I better, I need to think about this. And I prayed and heard God very clearly say, hey, you asked me, why are we having this conversation? And so that was Jim Hart, from a Heartline literary agency. We became really good friends, and he worked with me for a long time until Venus Sings the Blues. He retired last year. So if there's any agents out there that are looking for a promising old author, I'm available. Anyway, that Miracle Man, that was my first book. And I just wrote about this little town in Arizona. I grew up in Arizona, and this is, a town it was a fake town, but it was, very familiar in my mind. And that kind of became a little world of my own. And, and that rolled into a book called Truck Stop Jesus that got a lot of attention. That one did too. And then that's a fun book. It's about an eccentric actress and a washed up baseball player that road trip from basically Los Angeles to the Mexican jungle, with a couple of bounty hunters chasing them. It's a really fun book. And some of my favorite characters are in that book. I love it. Then that one, it went to a book called The Beautiful Ashes of Gomez, which Gomez is referenced in Goodbye from Venus. And that's where Bones, our main character in Goodbye from Venus, first makes his first appearance too. That's probably one of my favorite books I've ever written. It's really just a freeform, fun book into the mind of some pretty eccentric characters. That went to The Sound the Sun Makes, and that turned into, which was that mostly takes place in LA and then the desert in northern Mexico. And then Venus Sings the Blues, which I wanted to bring a couple characters back in and give them their own story that were kind of more minor characters in other books. Yeah. So That's the way it works for me. I'll write a book and I'll really like a minor character a lot. And I'll think, man, I really want to hang out with this guy some more. And so let's write a book about him. And then, so anyway, that's a really long way to answer that question. If that was even
really good. No, I liked that. I appreciate that, because as I was reading Venus Sings the Blues, I'm like, because I had you on before, so I had your bio, and in it talks about, the beautiful ashes of Gomez Gomez. And so you reference Gomez Gomez in Venus Sings the Blues. And I'm like, I wonder if that's the same book, The Beautiful Ashes of Gomez Gomez, because I haven't read that one. And so I was like, is it? And so before we actually started recording, I asked you, so I got the whole download of everything so I could put it straight in my mind.
Right.
But I love that. I love actually reading a series of books that can stand alone. And the way that you write, these books stand alone. I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. And anybody that's going to read this, if they just pick up Venus Sings the Blues, you're not going to feel, but you're going to go, hey, I was reading and there was this, a police officer, Early Pines. And I was like, there's got to be more to this story. And so that's why I had asked you before. Is Gomez, is there, because there was a reference with them being good friends. And so their stories are developed in previous books, but these books stand alone. So I think it's brilliant that you wrote them that way. But I also love that I can pick up when I'm reading a really good book, I want to pick up with the characters. Like I miss them. Like I'm going to miss the characters from The List and the Light until you come out with another one. I'm going to miss the characters from Venus Sings the Blues that you have in there, because there was things about them that endeared them to me. And that I was like, oh, these guys are so good. Like I really loved Bert/Buck, depending on who was talking to him. That was a really good one. So talk to me a little bit about like when you wrote this one, it was really to tell the redemptive story of Bones, to bring him back around. So.
Yeah. So in Gomez Gomez, I don't want to ruin books for anybody, but Bones has a somewhat prominent part through that book. He's not the main character, but he we leave him kind of with the Foster family and floating a little bit. He's a younger guy, teenager. But I found a lot of myself in him, and I wanted to develop his story a little more, and so I landed him at the Venus Motel in this book, working while also kind of being taken care of by the motel owner, Calico, and so I wanted him to have a story. One of the things that I loved writing about him was he kind of, in his mind, has the ability to go invisible, but not really. It's just because he's so unimportant, he can fade into the background in just about any situation and just observe and see what's going on, but really not be seen, And one of in the book, and I don't want to give anything away, but one of the things that I really liked, and I thought in my mind was a big development in his journey, was that Jimmy, the kind of the Christ character a little bit in the book, sees him wherever he is. He never is invisible around Jimmy. And I just love that about those two characters and their interaction. And so, to see Bones develop was a thrill for me. I really enjoyed writing him.
Yeah, it was, it's about this box. You said that at the beginning, kind of with the synopsis about this box that you put things in, disappears as allegory for when we bring things to the foot of the cross. And as I was reading that, I just thought it was so good because Jimmy kept asking different characters, well, if you could put anything in the box, what would it be? And how people were afraid to actually put things in the box. But I loved Cozy, man. She was like, I'm putting this in the box. Like she just didn't hesitate. Yet some other characters were like, I don't think I can do that right now. And but I loved the interaction with Jimmy. I loved how he just was there and saw everything, even though the people didn't see that he saw it, because that's how God is, right? Yeah. And Jimmy is a really rough around the edges, kind of chain smoking biker at the same time. So it's a different take on this whole thing, But you mentioned Cozy. Cozy is probably one of the funnest characters I've ever written in my life. And it's funny with
with women, writing women characters is always a challenge. I think it's a challenge for any male author. And so anytime I'm writing a female character, I take a lot of scenes to my wife or my daughter, especially my daughter's, I've tortured her for years. Whenever I finish a book, I say, set aside 10 hours and I sit her in the living room. She doesn't live with me anymore. She has her own house now, but I bring her over and I read to her for the whole book to her for 10 hours and then, or whatever, however long it takes. And she's so awesome. She patiently sits there and just slogs through the story, which helps me to read it out loud. And then I wind up going back and doing all my edits usually at that point. But Cozy, to write from her perspective, which is a very, very, very female perspective, was a challenge. But I love her character. I love her whole American Idol thing and her dreams. And I love her interaction and how she kind of doesn't take any stuff off of her husband, but also she's emotionally abused and she's very damaged, and I just loved writing her. She was a very real character to me. I knew a lot of people like that, and so she's definitely a conglomeration of people I've known in my past.
Yeah. And I think actually a lot of your characters are the raw reality of life. I mean, it's real life. Like I was reading Cozy's, and I'm reading her and I'm like, I know so many people like this. I know so many people like this. And yet she had the courage to be really the first one to put something of value in the box. And not did she just not only do it once, she did it more than once. And I'm not going to be a spoiler or anything for anybody, but it was powerful that she got a taste of the freedom of what happened when she put something in the box and let it go, and that she had to do it again. And then not only that, but then she became a champion for other people seeing different things too, because then, she talked to Calico and she's like, hey, give me your list that you have going here. Let me add some stuff to it. Let me give you a different perspective of things. And how it was this childlike faith, I think, in her too, that endeared me to her. I really liked her. I hope you're going to write a book about her.
I've thought about that because I think she's a fascinating character to me. I think maybe she will have to show up in some future books because I did. And you say childlike, and that I'd never really thought about that, but that is kind of her. She just sort of, with all the stuff she's gone through in her life, she still kind of holds that childlike view of things. Although it's a somewhat bitter, when she's still at the trailer, it's somewhat bitter view. But she's all in. And we know that one of the things that I wanted to get across in the book a little bit was, you got this box. Is it magic? Is it not magic? We don't know really, but it's the act of laying something down that changes people in this book. It's the act of letting go and saying, really releasing that makes a change in these characters' lives. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you're right with Cozy. It is kind of this bitter view, this childlike, but when she let that thing go, the first thing, and then the second thing, she had that childlike faith to believe this can change everything. And that's what Christ is saying to us, right? Come to me like little children, have the faith of a child, because we as adults are so skeptic and so holding on to those things. And I loved how you wrote her. And I love that it wasn't intentional. I love that so I can't wait. Okay. So as people read this particular book, every single one of your books has a different theme, a different message, a different thing. And so when you were writing Venus Sings the Blues, what do you want people to take away from this book when they're done reading this one?
Well, just that. I mean, it's the act of releasing the things that we hold on to. Sometimes we don't even know we're holding on to them, but there's a, like you just mentioned, Cozy talking to Calico and really taking an inventory of what is holding you back. What are the weights that are pressing you into the ground, and to be able to just mentally, and sometimes physically, just let those things go and just lay them down. I mean, that's really the theme of the book. Although I think the theme of this particular book is probably a little more complex than that. But so just the fact that we can just, Jesus says, hey, behold, I make all things new. We can be new, we don't have to be the person that we were yesterday or right now. 5 minutes from now, we could be somebody completely different. And so that's kind of the theme of the book.
Yeah. Because, write down, okay, oh, there's this theme, there's this theme, there's this theme. But one of the things that I think when I was all done reading it and I'm sitting and I'm thinking about it and kind of like, what questions do I want to ask you, or what things did I take away from it? And for me, it really is that message that our past doesn't have to dictate our future, that as we bring things to the cross, that as we bring things in, we willingly give them to God, that changes everything. And that's so powerful. And we saw it played out in the lives of all the characters that are quirky and yet raw and real that we can relate to.
Yeah, I love the way you said that, and I'm going to totally steal that for future interviews. Our past doesn't have to dictate our future. That's exactly right. That's it in a nutshell. Everybody, me, you, everybody listening to this has a messy past. No matter. I don't care if the worst thing you ever did was eat beef on Fridays. It's everybody's got a messy past. And so it does not have to dictate who we are today and from now on forward. Yeah. That's the beauty of Christianity, really, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the beauty. Yeah. It's not in our power. It's not us having to do it. It's God doing it for us. That's what God reaching down to us, not us working our way to him.
Yeah. And for the characters that you wrote, each one of them had kind of that moment, of having, wait a second, I have to make this choice that I'm not going to allow this, Yeah. Then there were those hard ones, in there that didn't really get affected or changed, but most of them did. And I love that. And I loved, because I could relate to each one. Like I could look at them, and as I was like Bert, I know people in my life that relate to that of having lost someone and then having a hard time moving on. Cozy and Calico and Bones being, this foster kid who wants to run away from everything. And, then there's also, Mr. Black, who is so fixated on one thing because he just needs that. There's just so many things about all of the characters that you had in there. And that's just an inkling of the characters in Venus Sings the Blues. So, Buck, how can people connect with you? How can they get a copy of Venus Sings the Blues or any of your other books?
Yeah, just come to my website, buckstorm.com. I believe right now there's a link on there that if you click on, and I think you just add your email to join my email list, which I don't pester people. I probably haven't sent out an email in a year, but that you get a free PDF download of The Miracle Man if you so desire to read the first book. But yeah, all the books are on there. All my music's on there too, and everything. It links to all the stores you can get everything. You can also find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you find books. I think Target, Walmart, all that stuff. But you can find it. But the best thing is to just go to buckstorm.com and join the family, because it's a fun place to be.
It is. And I did do that last time when I had you on back in April for The Light. I went immediately and signed up and he doesn't pester you, but you do get a copy of The Miracle Man. I have it. So, but I read these other ones, and then I was like, now I need to go read that one so I can see where, things all started. So, Buck, I always like to give the last few minutes to you just to kind of share anything. And if there's anything you want to pray for us based on what we talked about today, I'm just going to leave the last couple minutes to you.
Okay. Well, man, again, I'm just going to revisit what you said a minute ago, that our past does not have to dictate our future. And our future is glorious. I mean, we follow Jesus for the next 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes after that, and then you just keep going and watch the adventure that unfolds, just like the characters in the book. You never know where things are going to take you when you're walking with the Lord. Man, when I remember years and years of struggling to make it as a musician, and when I finally had that moment, and it's another long story, but when I had that come to Christ time and let everything go, God took me all over the world. We've been all over the world playing music and meeting wonderful people. And so, it's just forget the stuff in the past and let God be your future. If you're holding on to something tight, let it go. What's it going to hurt? And I think you'll find that you don't want to pick it back up again most of the time. So, yeah, that's it.
That's really good. And it ties into the theme of Venus Sings the Blues. So thank you, Buck, for another great story. I really appreciate your writing style, and I love the content that you choose to take on and tackle, because it really is the reality of life that many people are dealing with, and we can relate to the characters ourselves, or we can see them in somebody else, and it gives us a different perspective too on what other people might be going through. So thank you again for joining me on the podcast today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Well, thank you for listening to Dare to Hear the podcast, where we encourage you to dare to hear the voice of God. I'm Debbie Kitterman. If you've been blessed at all in any way, we ask that you do a couple of things. First of all, share, so we can get the message out about Venus Sings the Blues. Go get yourself a copy. And then if you're watching or listening to us someplace that you can leave us a review, or you can leave us a rating or share it out, we would absolutely love that, and follow along as well. Until next week, God bless and goodbye.
I'm not in the thunder, I'm not in the rain, I'm not in the winds of the hurricane. Look to me, I'm drawing in the air. I have called you, dare to hear. 'Cause there's peace in my presence, so do not fear. Oh, do not fear. I have called you. In the fall of